This is college football, and it's 2024. You're going to have people in the transfer portal every single year, and teams are going to take advantage of that. However, some teams do it more than their peers. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go ahead and go to FanDuel.com/locked on and make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, it actually ends today. Sports stop sporting the way that we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Every day, there is something for everyone all summer long. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. We'll wrap up today's episode with a description of Tennessee State's new hockey jerseys, and also why I believe that the way they're doing their rollout is very advantageous and appropriate to what they're trying to accomplish. Look at that alliteration. But prior to that, we'll give an update on Kai Cole because, yes, he is out of the Olympic trials. Nothing has changed with that, but we now have the MEAC side. We now have the USATF side. And then we also have another Twitter user who had a thread I want to break down because I believe that she really does tie everybody's sides together to give a full picture. But we kick off today's episode with the HBCUs who have dipped into the FBS transfer portal. I know it's all the same, but I'm speaking on FBS talent, and they've taken that more than their peers. I know that today's episode was supposed to be with Gerald Huggins, and y'all know I'm very appreciative of him because I was supposed to get my wisdom teeth taken out. Something happened, whatever. Don't feel like getting into it, but it didn't happen. Now I'm here to be able to give you an episode on Monday. I believe that episode will either come out Wednesday or Friday, though I am leaning more so towards Friday. Now, that being said, we're looking at HBCUs who have entered or who have taken players from the transfer portal more than their peers. And as I began prepping for this topic, I thought to myself, I said, dang, here I am talking about the transfer portal. And it's not that I have a problem speaking about the transfer portal. It's just that about a week, 2 weeks ago, I was up here telling you how I'm tired of talking about it. I didn't actually mean the talent that is coming in and out of the portal, because if I abandon talking about players leaving HBCUs or players coming into HBCUs, I'd be taking a huge section of my show and just throwing it in the trash. And that doesn't make sense. What I was speaking on is the pessimism. So just in case there's somebody like, oh, I thought you said you didn't want to talk about the transfer portal. No, I couldn't do that. It's just not possible. Like if the starting quarterback for FAMU, who, I mean, it didn't happen, but like the starting champion quarterback just entered the transfer portal, and I just said I'm not talking about transfer portal news, I would be missing on a big story. So let's just make it clear. I'm speaking on the way that the transfer portal is talked about, because I think good things come from the portal. And let's see if these 5 schools who have picked out FBS talent from said portal more than their peers end up getting some good things from them. Now, there's 5 schools who have double-digit FBS transfers coming into their team in 2024. Okay. Now, it's funny because I have some information, but it comes from Gerald Huggins and he says it on the show. So I'm going to leave it for that episode. But there's some teams in here who, hey, it's not as solid as you would think as far as the quarterback situation. Let's get into the 5 schools and stop tiptoeing, right? Let's dive straight into it. The 5 schools who have double-digit FBS transfers coming in are FAMU, Grambling, Tennessee State, Jackson State, and Bethune Cookman. And honestly, if I look at those five, four of them make an abundance of sense. Four of them are teams that if you ask me, hey, I got five HBCUs who picked up more FBS transfers than anybody else. Give me your five. I would have said FAMU for sure. That's the one I definitely would have said. I also think I would have said Bethune Cookman. That's probably the next team that I would have said. Grambling made a lot of sense, and I think Tennessee State makes a lot of sense. Jackson State just off of just pure feels, not as far as establishing the roster and whatnot, because there's a reason they did go out and get so many FBS transfers. I wouldn't have immediately been like, oh, they're one of those schools. But the other four, they make sense situationally to me, just off rip without me even having to truly think. So I'm going to focus on those four for today's episode. So number one, FAMU. If there's any team that should attack the transfer portal, it's FAMU. With all of the upheaval, with all of the pieces that are moving around, both on the coaching staff and also with the roster, you have graduates such as Musa, Shareed, Riley. Like those guys graduated. They're gone. Whether Willie Simmons was here or not, they were gone. So a guy like Daniel Richardson out of Florida Atlantic, they may have went to go get him no matter what. But it's also extenuated. And I had this conversation with my friends. It was about a cornerback, and I'm gonna send this. I'm gonna clip it. I'm gonna send it to him. But it's about a cornerback who's pretty solid cornerback. I don't think he had a bad day. I don't think he had I don't think he had a horrendous day like they do. But he was a part of a really successful day for the number one wide receiver. And one of my friends argued that perception is that cornerback got demolished because he was a part of a secondary who got demolished. That's what this feels like. Even when you look at players who were going to be gone no matter what, I'm looking at players like Gentle Hunt. I'm looking at players like Anthony Dunn. I'm looking at players like Johnny Chaney. I'm looking at those type of players who they left out of their own choice. So yes, did Isaiah Major graduate? Of course, but Johnny Chaney left. So now you're missing both of your linebacking duo. Now that just feels like a much more difficult blow, a much more difficult pill to swallow. So when you look at that side of it, of course they went and got 27. Maybe not 27 was the number I projected, but of course they went to go get buku players out of the transfer portal who are on the FBS level because you're FAMU, because you have a lot of cachet, not just nationally with your brand, but then also in the football realm with the success that you've had over the last 5 years or something like that, right? Like Willie Simmons has been a really good coach and has led the Rattlers to a lot of very successful seasons. Just because they just won their first Celebration Bowl, that doesn't mean, it doesn't even reflect the level of success that they've had recently if you don't view it through a black and white championship or nothing lens. So this is of no surprise. If you didn't project that FAMU was going to hit the transfer portal heavy, especially getting FBS transfers, I'm telling you right now, don't make that mistake again. You'll see this situation some other time. It happened with Jackson State last year. So I knew that that's how this was going to go. But then you look at Grambling. Grambling has a new head coach. And with that new head coach, obviously you're going to have them wanting to create it in their own image. This is not the Hugh Jackson era. Mickey Joseph doesn't want to live in that area. He doesn't want to ride with those guys, so much so that it sounds like Miles Crawley's job's not even safe. So if Miles Crawley's job's not safe, and I thought he played well enough, to be honest. I thought that Miles Crawley played well enough to where if I were a new coach, as long as he fit my system, if they went to stack up the roster and somebody shine, it sounds as if they were going to look for a quarterback competition. That's what I think I've reported on that before. So with Miles Crawley and whoever's in the mix, I think they got this guy from Ole Miss. Let me make sure that's Grambling. Yeah. So they got two quarterbacks in the transfer portal, one coming from Ole Miss. And we know that they've been putting out some pretty good collegiate quarterbacks, some very exciting collegiate quarterbacks. Not guys who are first round picks or anything, but pretty solid additions. And if he can play the way that some of the past 2-3 Lane Kiffin era Ole Miss quarterbacks can play, it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting because you don't think about their quarterback play. I'll say this. You don't really think about Ole Miss's quarterback play because they don't necessarily translate in the league, right? Like Matt Corral, I thought he was a very interesting quarterback when he was in college. I think Jordan Tamu went there, and then you got Jackson Dart right now. They play an exciting brand of football on the quarterback side. But yeah, Mickey Joseph is coming in to paint this his own image. Then you look at Tennessee State, who they also have their questions at quarterback. I've heard good things about Draylon Ellis in spring practice and everything about his command of the offense, his leadership within the locker room. I've heard good things about Draylon Ellis, but I've also seen how Tennessee State has viewed him in the past. Until they show that they view him differently, I always have to be a little bit hesitant on if they're going to put their full trust into Draylon Ellis. And they brought in a couple of quarterbacks, their sell. So, and the reason I think that they make a lot of sense, because you may question Eddie George has been there for a couple of years. You don't have that new head coach. You don't have that mass exodus, at least not that I think of. I know that they did lose the Buck Buchanan Award winner, Terrell Allen. I know that they did lose him, and they also lost Monroe Beard. But I don't think about them having a mass exodus. The reason I view them as a heavy transfer portal guys or heavy transfer portal team is because I know how aggressive they seem to be going. They seem to be very intent on, we want to compete now in this Big South OVC. And when you have the idea in college, when you say you want to compete now, you go to the portal heavily because you want immediate contributors. You want players who have some history. You want players who have experience, who can come in and say, all right, day one, we're going to be able to do something, not necessarily developmental, not project, but just developmental players, because going from high school to college, a lot of times it takes a little bit to get acclimated. And then Bethune Cookman is very simple. I just heard about him a lot. I've heard Bethune Cookman getting transfer portal players a lot. So it's not about their situation or anything. I just feel like I heard it. Whether it was Big Boy's son, whether it was Rick Ross' son, like, I just feel like I've heard a lot about Bethune Cookman in the news. And I'm going to save it because on Wednesday's episode, we're probably going to do it Wednesday. On Wednesday's episode, we're going to talk about Bethune Cookman and the buzz around the Wildcats. So FAMU not only has the most HBCU or most transfers from an FBS FAMU not only has the most FBS transfers as far as amongst HBCUs, they have the most amongst all FCS teams. Grambling comes in fourth at 17. Tennessee State fifth at 16. Bethune-Cookman and Jackson State tie at seventh with 13. So that's amongst all FCS teams that is broken down. So now as we push forward, let's look at this Kai Cole Olympic trial situation, because I have a lot more clarity than I did a week ago or a couple of days ago. And I want to give you that same clarity as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to end. I could literally watch football year round, 365 days, and be happy. But with the playoffs ending tonight, you can put some money down on the Stanley Cup. After that, you'll have to wait a little bit before the MLB kicks into action. But FanDuel wants to make sure that in that break between playoffs and high stakes, that you do not feel lost. So for all customers, not just new customers, new and existing customers, they'll give you a bonus, a benefit every single day all summer long. So FanDuel is looking to hook up all customers with a daily boost. So go ahead and head over to FanDuel.com/locked on and start making the most of your summer. You can already put some money down on football. Week 1 odds are already up. The Saints are 4.5-point favorites over the Carolina Panthers. I looked at it before I hopped on here to talk to you. So go to FanDuel.com/locked on and find out what your team is looking at for week 1. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day sports network on YouTube Live. So go ahead and check that out on Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. Let's look at the Kai Cole situation and give an update, because I believe we have the entire picture. I believe we have the entire picture of what happened with Kai Cole, because every important party has spoken up. That includes USA Track and Field. That includes the MEAC, and Kai Cole spoke up immediately. He's the reason that we know all of this. So now everybody that needed to speak up has spoke up, and this forms an entire picture, the full picture of what happened with Kai Cole. And then also I have an independent party who put up a wonderful tweet thread. So shout out to her. But anyway, let's get to Kai Cole's comment first. So he said, hey, the MEAC championships weren't sanctioned. So my time that I ran at the MEAC championships of a 10:05 in the 100-meter dash, it don't count. So I won't be at Olympic trials. That's what happened. And when that happened, I said, I need the MEAC to speak up because this is a problem. You have failed Kai Cole. Do I feel any differently now that I have everybody's side? No, I actually feel a lot more confident in that statement. The MEAC did mess up. But then again, I don't know what could have made me not feel that way. Maybe if the USA track and field would have been the bad guys here, but they're not to me still. But let's look at what the MEAC said, because I genuinely felt like they owed us a statement. They owed everybody some clarification on what they felt, because right now it looked like they had just dropped the ball. So let's look at what they said. And I quote, the MEAC was recently informed that our multiple attempts submitted, or excuse me, the MEAC was recently informed that our multiple appeals submitted to have Kai Cole approved to compete at this year's USA Track and Field Olympic trials was denied by the USA Track and Field. Despite posting an automatic qualifying time at MEAC Outdoor Track and Field Championships, although the MEAC Outdoor Track and Field Championships remain an official NCAA Division I championship event, USA Track and Field policy changes implemented this year resulted in the event not being officially sanctioned by USATF, making all competition results ineligible for Olympic trial qualifications. We understand Kai's frustration and took all available steps to rectify the situation so that he could perform or compete in Olympic trials, an opportunity he clearly deserves. End quote. Jesus Christ, that's a long quote. Did not realize it. One good thing that comes from this is that, at least for me, is that the MEAC didn't leave him out to dry after the fact. See, when I read Kai Cole's first statements, I felt as if the MEAC and Norfolk State abandoned him once he went to his appeals. I think that the MEAC made it very clear purposefully. I think the MEAC, because you look at it, they had two statements. One, our multiple appeals. So they want you to know we really did fight for Kai Cole. Secondly, took all available steps to rectify the situation. So they want to make it very clear, hey, this is a very tough situation, but we did try the most we could. Is that in response to Cole? Kind of feels like it, because everything that I'll say this, the MEAC making sure that they tell us that they took all available steps, the MEAC telling us that they took multiple appeals to fight for Kai Cole, it's very in line with what the problem is. The MEAC's very reactive, but they're not proactive when it comes to Kai Cole. That's how we got here today, because you're being reactive. Once his time was deemed ineligible, now you want to appeal. Now you want to fight, take all the available steps. But you didn't take all of the available steps to make sure that he never got into this position. So because the MEAC wants to be reactive instead of proactive, Kai Cole missed out on the Olympic trials. Let me break it down a little bit further. So the USA Track and Field said, hey, look, you got to make sure that it's cleared with the World Athletics calendar, which is right in line with what we're about to look at with this Twitter thread as well. You got to make sure it's right in line with that. And it wasn't. They ain't the only people who had to go through this. Kai Cole isn't the only athlete who had to deal with not being or having a qualifying time at a non-qualifying event. 15 people did it. All 15 people got knocked down and got denied. No exceptions were made. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have made the exception for Kai Cole. I'm talking, that's me right there. I wouldn't have made it, right? And I love Kai Cole. I don't know that, man. Let me not say I love this guy. I support Kai Cole, right? I support him. But if we're being real, if I had to look at an appeal and it was like, hey, man, this ain't my fault. This is the conference's fault. Okay, cool. What else have you done this year? And he hasn't ran a minimum qualifying time. So I'd been very unlikely. I wouldn't have budged when it came to Kai Cole, because yes, you ran a 10:05, but like I said, that's the race of your life in this event. I've said it before. That was the race of his season. He's never gotten anywhere close to that. And because you've never done it again, I have a little bit of doubt that you would be able to duplicate it again. So I'm sorry. That's a really tough break, but that's your conference's fault. And then I thought that at Dolas, DOLAS playbook on Twitter, or X, excuse me, I thought they did a really good job. She did a really good job of breaking down everything that came into play. It had to be the MEAC championships had to be on the World Athletics calendar, and it had to be on the USA Track and Field calendar. It more than likely was not on the World Athletics and was only on USA Track and Field. So when the MEAC tries to say, hey, the problem is they made a rule change really soon. Yes, you made a rule change, but you had the opportunity to put it on both calendars. This is according to her. So when you don't do it, to me, it feels like a calculated risk. And I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt with that, because it could just be negligence and not caring about track and field, not wanting to devote the resources to your biggest track and field event of the year. It could be pure negligence, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it's a calculated risk. When you speak about a calculated risk, their idea is you go in all of these big name events at these big schools, and all of those are on both calendars. So if you run a 10:05 at North Carolina Relays, you're going to make it to the Olympic trials because you qualified. But any of our events, you run it at Howard, you run it at Norfolk State, you run it at you're running at North Carolina Central, right? It doesn't matter, because you'll probably run it some other time as well. That's a calculated risk, but an unnecessary risk. And that's my problem, because you're at the champion. If I don't care if Howard, their event is sanctioned. I don't care if Norfolk State's event is sanctioned. I don't care if North Carolina Central. I don't care if Texas Southern. I don't care if Hampton. I don't care if their events are sanctioned. But the MEAC championships, that event has to be sanctioned. That there's no excuse for that. If these independent schools, because the idea was that the NCAA made a way for everybody to sanction their events. Big schools chose to do it. A lot of small schools chose not to do it. The MEAC as a conference, however, I do not give the benefit of the doubt. It is completely their fault, and they chose to not do this, and they have to reap. Actually, they don't have to reap the consequences. Kai Cole does. And that, to me, is the biggest problem. Because of either their negligence or their calculated risk that was extremely unnecessary, they chose to not have an event that is a lot of times when people run their best time sanctioned. Now, who does that responsibility fall on? The MEAC. Who does the consequence fall on? Kai Cole. And that is the reason that you will not be seeing Kai Cole in the Olympic trials this week or next week. Or I guess it ends this week now, even though I'm recording this on a Sunday. So as we push forward, let's look at Tennessee State's new jerseys, because they have a hockey team and they have revealed the jerseys. I want to break it down and break down the timeline as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And listen, your car ain't never given up on you. Why would you give up on your car? This has been your ride or die, whatever you want to call it. I used to call my girl Regina, but things happen, and now I have a new car. And you know what? She's not Regina, but I'm going to take care of her with everything that I got, and I'm going to go to eBay Motors if I need a part, right? Say your AC messed up. Say you need some new rims. Maybe you don't even care. Maybe it's not even a utility. Maybe it's just aesthetic. Maybe you just want to make your baby look better. Maybe you want some new LED lights, superchargers, man. Doesn't matter what you need, whether it's utility or aesthetic. All you have to do is go to ebaymotors.com, because they have everything that you could possibly want. ebaymotors.com is the place for you. All you have to do is put your 2007 Honda Accord into the My Garage section, and they'll show which ones of their 120 million parts are fit for your car. So go to ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Tennessee State has revealed their new hockey jerseys, and clearly I don't have the rights to these, right? So we're going to be very quick on this, but I do want to describe it to you, because I'm actually thinking about getting one of these. I don't think that I will, because I just won't feel right rocking the fraudulent TSU on my body, right? Because I'm from the real TSU, like, you see it. I should just record the rest of the segment like this. I am. Sorry, I'm gonna bang on the fake TSU today. I'm just gonna record my entire one, even though it's love. I think we need to know where everybody stands with this, right? Like TS. You. I thought you knew. All right, but anyway, Clearly, I don't have the rights to this picture. I'm just being stupid at this point, but I do want to describe it to you. I do want to describe this to you. Um, Nice jersey. Hockey jerseys are so clean. I don't have a hockey team. I guess I kind of claim the stars a little bit when they're successful. If they're not, I don't watch hockey. Um, but that being said, hockey jerseys look so good, man. And this Tennessee State jersey is no exception to that rule. When I look at this jersey, let me break it down for you. First off, it's a brighter blue than the typical TSU. Because Tennessee State typically is a darker hue when you look at just the like when you look at their Twitter page and things like that. Like they have a darker blue there, but it's a very bright blue. It's not like the one that I saw on their Twitter page. Even though I'm catching a brain fart on exactly what their jerseys look like in football. But this is a bright blue, red numbers on the back. Instead of having TSU across the chest, which I think was a good choice to avoid, I think that would have looked very bland if they would have done that. They went ahead and put the tiger on the front and they put TSU on the arm. And that's what I thought was nice. And then around the elbow, you had red and white stripes. It was a really dope looking jersey. White name plate on the back with blue lettering. I said the red letters already. This is a really attractive jersey, right? Like it's the thing that has me hesitating on how much I should be riding for this whole TSU versus TSU thing, because them joints is clean. Like I might just have to be like, all right, Darian, stop being childish. Let's go ahead and do what we got to do, because them jerseys look nice. I thought it looked really good. Let me talk about this, though. I think it's a slow rollout, and I appreciate it. Tennessee State isn't starting their season this year. They're not starting 2025, 2026. So that means you're going to have an entire year and a half, basically, before you get to Tennessee State hockey being a tangible thing. But in order to keep the excitement around, this is not gymnastics to me. With gymnastics, you could roll around and say, boom, I'm going to go ahead and I could use it like albums. You have certain albums and certain artists who could just drop an album, boom, out of the sky, and everybody's going to go crazy about it. It's Beyonce. Beyonce could drop an album today, and people will go nuts. Out of nowhere, no promotion, no nothing. Just we're going to drop this album. But then you have other artists who need to have a rollout. You have other artists who need to go on to these radio shows and do interviews. You have guys who sometimes you need a single, sometimes you don't. There's just different artists, and you need to do more to get an album, to get an audience excited for an album. That's hockey. They got to do a little more. There's not going to be a hockey game until the winter of 2025. I need to keep the excitement up. I need to keep this up, especially knowing that the community is not huge on hockey. And with the community not being huge on hockey, all right, that's cool. I'm just going to give you this jersey right now. We got one recruit. I expect things to get really heavy at the end of the year, maybe beginning of next year. So maybe winter 2024, spring 2025. That's when I think things will really heat up. But until then, I think they're going to slow play it, and I think that they're right to slow play it. Because if you want to keep giving little teasers here and there, that's how you keep the interest staying around. Because people may forget about it. Attention span is a lot of times, I think attention spans these days are already low or small, but they get even smaller once you start talking about something that you're trying to convince them to care about. So let's keep putting Tennessee State hockey in your face. That way you can't forget it. Once we do roll around with a game, once we do roll around with a recruiting class or maybe an exhibition or maybe a camp, like this has been well done. Hey, we're going to do Tennessee State hockey. All right. Now we got a coach. Hey, we also got a recruit. Now here go our jerseys. Then eventually they might announce what conference they're going to be in. I think that the way that they're playing this is very well done. It's very slow, and I think that's a deliberate decision, and I like that decision. Now, on Wednesday's episode, I've decided while recording, we're just going to do Gerald Huggins' episode on Friday. But on Wednesday, we're going to look at Norfolk State wrestling and the potential of bringing that back to the Spartans. I'm excited for it, in addition to looking at Bethune Cookman's buzz around their team. So I can't wait to get back to you on Wednesday. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. TS. No, I'm joking. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.